This podcast was recorded prior to the events of October the 7th, 2023.
Good morning, David.
A jolly good morning to you, Mark.
We're in the back of a van.
Well, we're in the middle, if you're going to be accurate about it.
Well, we're not in the front seat, if I'm going to be pedantic about it.
We've not been arrested.
No.
We're not being carried away.
Well, we get carried away regularly.
Oh, if you listened to our podcast a short while ago, you'll have heard that we visited the absolutely gorgeous, fascinating, compact capital of Latvia, Riga.
And this podcast, for the next 3 hours, will be called Motorways of Latvia.
One of the interesting things about once you get out of major cities, and this is true all over the world, is you get down to a lot of roads where there's just one lane in each direction, and obviously 3 vehicles in front of us. There's a large white truck, and we will be spending a considerable amount of time hoping that that truck turns left or right as we head straight out to the Latvian coast.
So I was having a very leisurely morning, woke up nice and late, had a beautiful breakfast at the Radisson Blu Riesdene, if I've pronounced that correctly. A lovely hotel with a little room for Shabbat as well.
They have a hidden room for people who are Jewish and are kosher observant and Shabbat observant in the corner behind reception. There's boxes of, I think, matzah, there are some snacks, various types of things that you would find in maybe a deli in a smaller town where there are not that many Jewish people.
And if you're Shabbat or Sabbath observant, there is a hot plate in there. And I think I saw an urn or a Shabbat kettle,
yes,
as they are called. Very nice and very surprising to find.
What's a Grecian urn?
About 50 drachma a week.
Thank you very much.
Although it's euros now, so there you go.
Yeah.
So why are we in the back of the van, David?
Please forgive me for any mispronunciations of the Latvian language during the course of this podcast. We're heading out to the coastal port of Liepaja, which for many Jewish people listening to this, and not just Jewish people, but anybody who headed from Europe over the period of, say, from the 1870s up until the Second World War, may well have left Europe from the port of Liepaja. And so if you look back, perhaps if you're listening to this in America, documentation from your grandparents, from your great-grandparents, you may well find that their port of departure was indeed this city on the coast of Liepaja. One of the reasons that we're headed there is me being a little bit self-indulgent, that this is where my family lived, my mother's family, my great-grandfather, my great-grandmother, and the same way that we went to Konin a few episodes ago to visit where Mark's grandmother came from. So we're doing the same here, and hopefully you will enjoy and find interesting routes travel here in Latvia. So join us on this journey, which will also take in palaces, coastal towns, and a whole lot more that this beautiful and small country has to offer.
Did you bring your coat?
Not a coat. Why, have you found out it's going to rain?
No, but Liepaja is also known as the city where wind is born. It's almost like a twin city with Chicago.
Yes.
Did you bring your coat?
I've got a warm thing.
Good. I don't want you catching a chill, babe.
Oh, darling. Right, so time for quiz question.
So it's a 2-part quiz question. And it's a fashion question because David and I are obviously icons of fashion.
I'm a fashionista. I don't even know what it means, but I am one.
Dressed in those shorts, I'm not so sure. The first part of the question is, who invented jeans? The second part of the question is, which Italian city is linked with the invention of jeans?
The answers at the end of the pod.
This is the Jerusalem Post Podcast Travel Edition. Find us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at MarkDavidPod or mail us at markdavidpod@gmail.com.
Hello, my name is Ilana Ivanova Zivcum. I'm the director of the Liepaja Jewish Heritage Foundation. We are doing research of Jewish heritage of Liepaja, of Kurland, and now we are in the museum of the Liepaja Jewish community. We see some stands that are dedicated to the very start of the Jewish community in Liepaja.
Tell us a little bit about the history of the Jews of Liepaja.
The first Jews appeared there accidentally, starting already with the 15th century by crossing the area, buying amber, selling amber. We would say that the start of the Jewish community is 1799, when Kurland becomes the Kurland gubernia of Russian Empire.
Kurland Governorate.
In 1799, the Russian Tsar Pavel gives the Jews the rights to buy land, build synagogues, prayer houses, and own premises and so on. And we consider the founding of the Jewish community 1799.
As with many other places, it was trade that brought people here. How does the community develop? Presumably in those days it was a few men, not women. So did they bring with them their wives? They couldn't find local Jewish women because there weren't any here. How did the community grow in those early days?
Usually there was somebody who came over to check the situation, the land, the conditions, the possibilities to start business, develop business, and then they usually brought families. And then member of the family brought his brother with his family. And so one family brought another, and you know the Jewish families usually were very big. So there is another question, where did they come from? We have investigated. We know that a lot of them came from Lithuania, but not less came over from Prussia. So that is why the German language became one of the main languages in communication.
How big did the Jewish community of Liepaja get, and how influential was it in the overall city?
Let's say before World War I, it made up 13% of total inhabitants. It was quite big. I think there were about 13,000. Of course, 25% of business was in the hands of Jews.
What about Jewish life? What existed here? Synagogues, kosher butchers? What was the life like for the Jews?
It was a real Jewish life, without any special headquarters for Jews. Everything was mixed. So not far from the community premises where we are today. So there was Bikur Halim Hospital. Just opposite the street there was an Orthodox church. To my mind, Liepaja was really in the 20s and 30s of the 20th century. It was a sample of well-to-do living, I mean, in the sense of respect between people of different nations, of different minorities.
And you said at the peak there were 11 synagogues here?
Yeah, 11 synagogues and prayer houses. The Horel, the main synagogue, was close to the marketplace. The Horel synagogue invited prominent cantors to sing. Non-Jews often attended the concert. They loved it very much.
Given the German influence here, and given that Liepaja was outside of the Pale, how religious was Liepaja as a city, or was it quite liberal?
It was quite liberal, I would say. Although there was a part of Jews who were very religious, but the majority was modern. Nagila Hava, Nagila Hava, Nagila
Tell us about your early memories of Liepaja. Tell us about your childhood here.
I was born in 1946. It was already occupied by the Soviet Union. I grew up with the stories of my mom about the pre-war Liepaja. I imagined myself a very beautiful city, very kind and peaceful life. Later, when I came across with the reminiscences of survivors, it gave me a proof to believe that this, what my mom told me, was true.
Your parents were survivors of the Holocaust here. A lot of survivors don't talk about their experience. Do you remember your parents telling you much about the wartime here?
No, they didn't talk about at all. Father never spoke about the Holocaust. When I grew up already being a student and already as a mother and a grandmother, so my mom from time to time shared reminiscences about this terrible times.
So now it's time for you to tell your parents' story.
When the Nazis entered the city on the 29th of June 1941, there were 5,500 Jews blocked. surrounded by the Nazis, so there was no way out. The Jews have been attacked by the local collaborators, and the first extermination of Jews started already in July. Robert was a friend of my father before World War II. He worked as a janitor, and he was a sportsman, and he was a very nice, real Latvian guy, strong, handsome. My father learned from one of his classmates that the ghetto will be liquidated. For me, it was very important to put the puzzle together. Why did my father and my mom run away from ghetto, leaving his mother-in-law, his beloved niece from France, and other relatives, and running away in the shelter to Robert and Johanna Sedwals? And now I understand that for him it was most important not to be killed like a wordless animal.
Меня зовут Глазунов Игорь.
My name is Igor Glazunov. My real Jewish name is Igor Bekovsky. I was born in 1941 in the women's prison in Liepaja. The first days of bombing of Liepaja, it was a hell, and there were very big difficulties for civilians to escape from the city.
Гражданскими была затруднена.
So a Nazi came up to the people who were at the railway station. Out of the column, the Nazi officer selected Jews, the whole family of Igor's father, and since then they never met them again.
Наша семья их не видела.
So on 4th of July, they were killed in Park Reinitz. The first shootings took place there. And thanks to a special research group that works with victims of World War II, it cleared out that they were found buried, killed in Reinitz parks, and then reburied at the Jewish cemetery.
Занимались этими вопросами.
So on the same day, it's the 29th of June, his mom is Russian, his grandmother, maternal grandmother, they all were taken to the women's prison by the Nazi officers.
Другими военнослужащими.
Thanks to the point that his mother was a medical person, so thanks to it, they survived. Although in all the cameras there were about 20-25 people, like herring in a barrel.
30 человек. Поэтому, как медик, ей удалось выжить.
On the 26th of July 1941, he was born in the women's prison.
Там и родился.
2 days after his birth, without any comments, his mother and maternal grandmother received an Ausweis permission from the Nazi authorities to stay in town and live there.
В свободном режиме.
Since they didn't know Latvian, they didn't speak the language, so his grandmother decided that they have to leave the city for a countryside, because she was from a countryside herself and she knew how to live in the countryside. And the grandmother decided that there they could survive during war times. So they went out to a farm. And thanks to a white German, Vogel, who had his farm, they lived at his farm until 1945.
Где мы прожили до конца войны.
We've heard about Liepaja before the war. We've heard these tragic stories that also have a happy ending. There's a community centre. Tell me about the life today for the Jewish community.
Since the revival of the Jewish community in 1999, we tried at the beginning to follow the tradition of the pre-war Libo, because the survivors were alive, they were with us, they shared their reminiscences. But of course, we follow all Jewish holidays, and we celebrate them, and we organize different events. You can see here on our stand the photographs. People are happy, and there is a special attention to the needy people. And thanks to our partner, the Foundation Uniting, they get a very good support in their daily life. So the Jewish community itself tries to promote different activities. And since last year we started a new project in our foundation. It is My Jewish Roots Revival. This is meant for younger generations, those who are, let's say, 16 and up to 40, those who had no Jewish tradition or knowledge about their Jewish roots. We help them to find their Jewish roots. We help them to prove that they have Jewish roots. We find documents, then we help them with investigation. And believe me, even for younger people, those who are 19, 20, it's opening another world that they ever didn't know. And then when they try to imagine what could happen to this Jewish community if there would not be a Holocaust, no world war, how flourishing, how interesting, how vivid would be the life of not only Jews of Liepaja, but other minorities who were quite a lot there, German, Polish, Lithuanian. This is of great importance for the church to know, to learn, to respect, and like a daughter of survivors, there is no sense to blame someone and to find those who are guilty in it, but to find out, to protect the future community, future generations, that from any hatred that may cause something similar.
If you're somebody who's interested in finding out about your roots in Liepaja, like David is, or if your family went through the port of Liepaja on their way to their journey to America or the UK or anywhere else, how do they get in contact with the community to find out about Liepaja?
The research is done by Liepaja Jewish Heritage Foundation. They can just visit our website, liepajajewishheritage.lv.
Tell us about modern Liepaja.
Modern Liepaja is a modern city, at the same time who has preserved its past. And I would say it's improving, and it becomes more and more attractive and more beautiful. Liepaja, before World War II, was something similar, a small Switzerland city. Today you will see not so many as we wanted, but still modern buildings with preserving the past, like Jugend style that is mixed with using more material, modern material and modern style, but it's very well integrated in the old traditions of the city development. A wonderful beach, wonderful park. I adore the city. When I made sightseeing, my intention always was, I want to show you the city so that you fall in love with the city and you want to come back. I'm not going to tell you the chronology of it. What was look to the left, look to the right side. I'm going to tell the life stories. Who lived in this house? Where did they go? They went to the market. What did they buy? What did they do at the market? They tested pickles, they tested coleslaw, smoked meat or whatever. So this was the life. Today we are testing strawberries, the best strawberries in the world.
I want to say thank you to the three of you. We haven't heard from your sister Elana, but thank you. Thank you, Igor. Elana, thank you. And I want to say a very special thank you to the 26 righteous Gentiles from the Liepaja region, one of the highest percentages of righteous Gentiles recognized anywhere in Europe during the Holocaust period, because without them, we wouldn't be able to have this conversation with you today. Thank you.
Our last stop in Liepaja is Škeda, the site where the community of Liepaja was essentially wiped out. 5,000 members of the Jewish community, Soviet, Latvians, Roma, and even people with mental illnesses were all shot by the Germans and by the local paramilitary force here. For David, this spot will have an extra special meaning. Members of his family from Liepaja will have been brought here. I think some of them may have even been filmed here.
Yeah, there's a unique piece of film. It's one of, if not the only piece of film where you see Jews having been lined up Made to Undress, you actually see the execution, the shooting taking place. It's a piece of film that Yad Vashem has. It was filmed actually by, I believe, a German officer at the time. In December of 1941, in the space of 2, maybe 3 days, 2,700 people were shot on these sand dunes where Mark and I are standing now, and among them the Leventhal, Brandt and Liepaja families, my second, third cousins and their relatives, and their names are plain for everybody to see if you go to the Jewish Community Centre in Liepaja.
To our right we have the sea, tranquil and beautiful, yet no more than 50 metres from the sea, a place where pure evil reigned.
But as we learnt in our previous podcast from Riga, from the director of the Ghetto and Holocaust Museum in Riga, a very powerful message. He said, yes, of course, we have to remember the 6 million, and in my case, the family members of mine that perished here. And Mark has told you before about the stories of his family in previous podcasts. But the most important thing is to remember that we must celebrate life, that we must learn, in his words, tolerance, and as we heard from Ilana today, her preferred word is respect. You're listening to the Jerusalem Post podcast Travel Edition. Find us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at MarkDavidPod, or mail us at markdavidpod@gmail.com.
Hello, welcome to Rundale Palace. My name is Olafs and I'm the guide in the museum. And this palace was built like summer residence for Duke of Courland in 1736. So this palace represents the Baroque style.
Who was the Duke of Courland?
The Duke of Courland was Ernest Johann von Buren, one of the Baltic Germans, as mostly nobility in this region were Germans.
Tell us a little bit about what his responsibilities were, the area that he covered. Was he basically a king of Courland?
No, he was just a Duke of Courland, because this Duchy of Courland was under Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. So basically the main person in Courland was a Polish king. He was just like a almost employee of king.
The house is in magnificent condition. It's very large, very grand. Obviously, there's been quite a turbulent history in Latvia in the last 100 plus years. How has the house remained so beautiful?
One of the reasons is that the Rundale Palace is located in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing around this palace, like a big cities or big objects, That's why it survived. And this palace is unique for all Baltics because it's totally authentic 18th century. Represents the Baroque and Rococo styles.
What's the connection between the Duke, this palace, and Russia?
Duke of Courland, Ernest Johann, the first owner of this palace, was a favorite of Russian Empress Anna Ioannovna. He was actually an official ruler of Russian Empire for 10 years, since 1730 till 1740.
Are we seeing in this palace similar styles maybe to things that we might see if we were able to, in peaceful times, in St. Petersburg?
In St. Petersburg, yes, actually, because the architect was Francesco Rastrelli, and that was the same architect who designed those famous ruler residencies in Russia, like Winter Palace, Peterhof, Catherine's Palace.
There are so many stunning rooms in here. Do you have a favorite room, and why?
My favorite room, maybe it's the audience cabinet, that the pink audience cabinet with neoclassical style furniture, because I just love the color and the neoclassical style.
Mark and I, quite some years ago, were in Kiev in Ukraine, and we went to a museum of toilets, and we saw some very interesting small toilets. Tell us a little bit about the facilities that you have here.
There's a different. Of course, we have a very special bathrooms for the Duke. He owns 3 bathrooms. One of them are very well equipped with a sitz bath, commode chair, bidet. There was even a heater for the rooms. But during parties, for example, in the White Hall, there was a powder rooms. And in 18th century, they can use those powder rooms as a toilets. If somebody during the party need to go to the toilet, They just call for his chambermaid. She brings a chamber pot, and they can make this business in the powder rooms. And then the maid just take it away.
Where are the Kurland family today, and what happened to the Kurlands? Why are they no longer here, and what happened in that period in between?
The Duchy of Kurland existed till the end of the 18th century, when last Duke Peter Biron in 1795 abdicated the throne, and one of the reasons was that he had 4 daughters and no sons. Then this Duchy of Kurland became a part of Russia, and Russian nobility owns the palace till 1920. In 1920, the state took over this building, and then this building was used in very different ways. For example, there was elementary school for local kids, apartments for the teachers of this school. After World War II, when this was the part of Soviet Union, there was even a grain storage in one part of the building.
And basketball?
Yeah, well, basketball hall, yes. That was during the school, in the marble hall, which was originally used like a hall for family meals.
One of the grandest staff rooms for teachers you will ever see.
So what about today? It's a home that people visit, it's an art gallery, it's a concert hall. What are you trying to do with this place?
I would like to say that it's everything, It's a museum, of course, first of all. There's lots of different exhibitions. There's gardens, of course, one of the most beautiful gardens in Baltics, and actually the biggest rose gardens in all Baltics. Of course, museum organize different concerts every year. The place for culture of society.
How can people find out more about the museum and possibly book a visit here?
In the homepage, rundale.net.
Olaf, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for your visit. I hope you enjoy your time in Rundale.
Thank you, Olaf. We've left our hotel. We've driven maybe 2 or 3 kilometers from the hotel, and we've come to the forest. It's very quiet, other than birdsong, but this area we've arrived at has a story behind it.
My name is Petris. I'm a guide of Riga, a teacher as well, and we are in Rumbula, in a place where 25,000 Jews of Riga perished in 1941 and 45. This is a beautiful place, and I always wonder how people do most incredible and crazy things in beautiful places. This is what they did. This is what Nazis did at the end of the war.
In brief, tell us the story.
It happened so that first of all, Nazis gathered all the Jews of Riga in a ghetto, separating those that were able to work. They were working as slaves and nationalized properties, and then realizing that there is nothing to do with others, a decision was made just to kill them. Organizers of this crime were the same that did Babi Yar, a crime in Kiev, for instance, Friedrich Jekeln, and they organized it in the very same way as well. So people were told to walk. They walked several kilometers, believing they walked to the train station, because one of the biggest cargo train stations is about this direction, and probably they were guessing their destination, but they didn't meet it. When they realized it's their last walk, it was too late. There was police guarding, and there was no escape to the left or right. So they were commanded to drop their belongings in piles, to dress down. And what I cannot really understand, why didn't they escape during the way, or why didn't they resist? Because imagine 25,000 people, and they were guarded by hundreds of policemen. And approaching the pit, they had to dress down and lay down on people that were just killed or maybe deadly wounded, and they had to wait for their own bullet. This is just blowing my mind.
As we were coming here, you were telling us that during the Soviet era in Latvia, the communist government didn't really want to recognize the site, didn't really want to put memorials here. We're here in 2023. It's still quite sparse, but there are now a number of memorial stones and monuments here. Can you tell us a little bit about them and their history?
In Latvia, we in fact mostly lived in a fragile balance. All the different religions and ethnic and national background people. Everybody had its own place. When Soviets occupied Latvia, they also arrested and killed Jews because starting with Stalin himself, they were pretty anti-Semitic themselves. And for this reason, after the war, they didn't recognize Holocaust as a separate crime. Riga's Jewish community tried to place memorial stones in these massacre places several times, but they were even persecuted. For this reason, stones were removed until under Khrushchev things changed gradually, and they could at least talk about crimes against Soviet people, not crimes against Jews, not Holocaust as a special and separate crime. Of course, everything changed with the restoration of our independence, early 90s, and the government of Latvia, especially under presidency of Ms. Vaira Vīķe-Freiberga, did everything to put back this story into our history books, into people's minds, to understand also our participation of Latvians themselves in this crime, and to never repeat it again. So for this, proper monuments were built all over the country.
As we were walking around here, you mentioned that you used to bring groups of school children aged maybe 10 to 12. How do you explain this place to children so young who have no personal connection?
Yes, it's never easy, but I tried to explain them on example. I just said, imagine yourself, you live good life, you have parents, grandparents, you have what you have, and suddenly some power comes and takes you away everything, your freedoms, your parents, and finally your life. And so sometimes when coming with children here and telling this story, I asked our driver to stop a distance before, to make our kids walking this distance, walking quietly, thinking and trying to imagine how it is that you walk not knowing where, and finally it appears to be the last walk in your life.
Latvia Fact File. Riga has an international airport which acts as a hub for state-owned airline Air Baltic. Air Baltic fly direct to Tel Aviv and also fly to most European cities, Istanbul and Dubai. Turkish Airlines, Lufthansa and Transavia fly direct to Riga, allowing for good connections to the US. The 22 bus will take you from the airport to the city centre for just €2 one way. Riga has 3 methods of public transportation: tram, trolleybus and bus. A 3-day ticket for all 3 costs around €8. Latvia has car share schemes that allow you to obtain a car using an app and leaving the car at your destination. Details on the Latvia Travel website. We stayed in the Radisson Blu Radzene, which contains a room for Shabbat observant guests. The Elizabeta Hotel is also Shabbat friendly. Other recommended Riga hotels include the Radisson Old Town, Radisson Blu Daugava and the Park Inns Barona and Valdemara. The 5-star Promenade Hotel in Liepaja with its piano restaurant is a good choice for the area. Jurmala has the 5-star Baltic Beach Hotel and Spa with the Il Sole restaurant with fantastic beach view. Latvia has a temperate climate. The western coast possesses a more maritime climate with cooler summers and milder winters, while eastern parts exhibit a more continental climate with warmer summers and harsher winters. The currency of Latvia is the euro. €100 will cost you $109. Latvian cuisine typically consists of agricultural products with meat featuring in traditional dishes. Fish is also commonly consumed due to Latvia's location on the eastern shore of the Baltic Sea. Whilst there are no kosher restaurants, kebab meals can be booked by appointment.
You're listening to the Jerusalem Post podcast travel edition with Mark Gordon and David Harris. Oh, Mark, it's good to be the king sometimes.
Oh sole mio, as they say. We are at the Baltic Beach Hotel and Spa in Jurmala, which is a coastal town, probably 20 minutes, 30 minutes train drive outside of Riga. It is beautiful.
The town is the ultimate peaceful seaside town. As we were coming in, Charlotte, who spent the day with us, was looking around and saying, notice how people are walking at a much slower pace than they do in Riga or any other major city. This is a very long, narrow city. On the one side, it's bordered by a river, and on the other by the Baltic Sea.
And Vilja, who we met in our Riga podcast, has been photographing some of the houses here. This is the place to come. This is the Latvian equivalent of, I don't know, Herzliya Pituach in Israel?
The Riviera.
The Riviera, French Riviera?
French Riviera, the Italian Riviera, you name it. It's very, very relaxed. And over dinner, I was saying to both of the ladies and to you that looking out at the sun that's been really pouring in, the people in the water at 10 o'clock at night, you would think that we are closer to the equator than the North Pole, and yet here we are, the Baltic Sea. Finland is just, a couple of hours across the water there. It's unbelievable. It's totally unexpected and wonderful.
It's a really lovely place to unwind. We're in the Il Sole restaurant. It has a very long balcony that overlooks the sea, and we've been here maybe 2 hours watching the sunset, and it's taking its time to set. Like you say, it's 10 o'clock and the sun is still up. It's still light outside. It's a really nice place to come for an evening dinner. We are at the end almost of 3 amazing days in Latvia. For those of you that listened to our Riga podcast a month or so ago, they'll recognise this voice. This is Vilja, who has been instrumental in setting up this trip for us. Vilja, we've been outside Riga now, and we've been to Liepaja, Jurmala, we've been to Rumbula. I'm getting good at this. Rumbula, Rundale.
They all sort of rhyme. What is it that yourself and Jewish Travel Latvia are trying to bring to tourists who are going to see these types of places?
To my mind, the most important thing that I want to say that Latvia is, all the country is easy to travel. On your own, it's easy to travel with some arranged services, but different small towns, different places are easy reachable. They have a lot of interesting history, and definitely should be planned on your trip to Latvia.
We mentioned the places that you arranged for us to visit, and of course everybody has already heard us reporting from those places. Are there some other highlights that you would like to mention, maybe other places that people should consider visiting in the country?
Yes, definitely. Daugavpils, I guess that's the place, this is the second largest city in the country, and also this is a place extremely rich of Jewish community previously, before the World War II, but that was the largest Jewish community with some great names coming from Daugavpils, or normally known as Dvinsk. That's Rabbi Rogachev, that's most famous person, it's Rav Kook. So I guess Dvinsk or Daugavpils, that's the place.
For those people who are not familiar, say the name slowly so they can look it up on a map or online.
It's Daugavpils, Daugavpils.
And we learned that Pils means castle, right?
Yes, that's correct. So it's a castle on the river Daugava. That's how it's called, Daugavpils. And yeah, but apart of that, Latvia is really rich in amazing nature. We have a huge seaside. We have a lot of forests, rivers. So I guess everyone can find something for him in Latvia, to stay in different mansions, to experience farmhouses. That's, you can plan a really long holidays here.
David got the opportunity to go back to his family's town of origin in Liepaja, and a lot of people that will come here will be wanting to trace back stories that they found through genealogical research, through what their families have told them. If someone's coming to Latvia and they're not necessarily from Riga, how much time should they plan for a trip that would include seeing the sights of Riga but then going out to find out about their family?
I guess here we have 2 periods to plan. So first of all, if you know where your family is, then it's easy. But a lot of people, they just know very roughly. So I would say that you have to start planning your trip at least 1 year in advance if you want to do a family research. If you just want to visit the places, then of course you're welcome to buy the ticket and to fly in. And I would say that you should plan at least 3 days in Riga and then at least 3 days outside of Riga, because the country, it seems small, but the distances, they're quite big. And in order to see everything and to take some time, I mean, look, we are talking about the spiritual trip. We're talking about tracing family heritage. So I don't think that you should be in a real rush. And especially that Latvia is a nice place to spend your time. So from 5 days to 1 week, that would be the time if you're trying to see something more deep.
Vilja, you're not Latvian. You're Lithuanian, and you've got another business dealing with travel to Lithuania. Maybe in another podcast sometime down the road we'll talk about that as well. What is it about Latvia that turns you on? What is it that gives you this oomph, this desire, and also the fact that you're working within the Jewish sphere to a large extent?
I would start from the fact that Latvia and Lithuania, these are two remaining Baltic tribes. So we are not that different. Secondly, I've been in this business for many years. And I guess that in terms of inviting people to come, we always invite to see all Baltic states. So I think that Latvia, Lithuania, or even Estonia, separately, they are a little bit too small to be seen in the world. So I think that we should talk together, and then Baltics would be more known. But talking about Latvia and Riga in particular, I think that Riga has this amazing blend of capital city with a huge city center, historical city center, then the seaside, which is just half an hour from the city center, and the best restaurants. I'm sure that good restaurants, they stay in Riga for years, and we have a number of places that are really remarkable, that should be seen. So if you're a foodie, then it's a third reason to come.
Vilja from Jewish Travel Latvia, thank you for everything over the last 3 days.
Thank you for coming, and I have to say that wasn't possible without the huge support of Latvian government and Latvian National Tourism Agency, who are looking forward to welcoming Israeli travelers, welcoming Jewish travelers, as well as a lot of other travelers from the world. I think that it's time for Latvia to be a top destination, as I hope that you have seen in those couple of days that we really have something to show to the world.
Have you listened to the Jerusalem Post podcast travel edition? I'm David Harris, and together with my co-host Mark Gordon, we bring you the best from the world of travel and tourism.
We have people who literally fly to Park City just to do the ski minion.
And it has that heavenly taste that you don't really find nowadays in the market.
When was the last time you went to a restaurant and they bought you a picnic basket, about 8 courses in?
The Dracula tour, that's a very unusual honeymoon option, really.
The Jerusalem Post podcast travel edition brings you the joys of travel and tourism. So why not subscribe today wherever you get your podcasts?
Cheers, Mark.
Cheers, David. Oh, so that's pretty much it, David. Back home.
The plane beckons. We are heading in that direction. I'll do an emotional thing in a minute, I guess. But how do you find it? It's your first visit to Latvia, and we saw Riga in the previous pod, but now we've seen Latvia, not just the capital.
For me, Riga was a little bit more like going to a capital city. There was the obvious Jewish part. This was, I think, a little bit more heartwarming. It had, unfortunately, a number of stories of the Jews that were horrifically murdered in Liepaja and in Rumbula. But then from each of these places, we got moments of hope. We spoke with survivors, we spoke with tour guides and people that bring children to these sites. And now we've been able to see that even in a place like Jurmala, with a beautiful restaurant, round the corner there's a new Chabad center and a synagogue, and Jewish life is thriving not just in Riga but in the country itself.
I'll add to that, and as you know if you've been listening through this podcast, that this has been a very personal trip for me. When we were recording the lovely people in Liepaja playing the piano and singing, you didn't hear all the voices that were in the room, but the people who were singing, I was looking at them and thinking, just round the corner in the area that the Jews lived, it might well have been that generations ago, my great-great-grandparents would have sat around a piano just like that, sung Yiddish songs, maybe sung Hebrew songs. And that for me was a very special moment. And to see that despite everything, there is still a community, maybe an aging community, but there is still a community in Liepaja, that was a wonderful moment. If you've been very upset during this podcast, Mark and I apologise, because as in the Riga episode, the deputy chairperson of the municipality said, it's kind of incumbent upon Latvia and on people like Mark and myself to tell the story of the Holocaust. But I think it's also very important for Mark and myself, not only that we tell those tragic stories, but also that you realise that this part of the world is not just about those 6 terrible, terrible years, but hundreds of years of history before that, of synagogues, of rabbis, of learning, of art, of culture, of history, all of it part of the fabric of the Jews that we are today.
A few thank yous. Thank you to Vilja from Jewish Travel Latvia, who has organised this trip for us.
Unbelievable.
And has been amazing and been our guide and been with us throughout the whole trip. Also, Charlotte from Travel Latvia, or Leah as it's known locally, for setting up a lot of the meetings, the accommodation, the flights, everything.
Feeding us.
Oh yeah, and some very, very top-class grub.
The food in this country is great. Mark, must be time for a quiz question, or quiz answer.
It is. I asked you about jeans.
Jeans what?
Jeans trousers.
Oh, okay.
There's a lady called Jean who has some trousers. No, denim jeans, as they were. And I asked for the name of the person with the Latvian connection that invented jeans. And for all of you out there that said Levi Strauss, you're not entirely wrong, but you're wrong. The actual answer is Jacob W. Davis, who was born Jakobs Jufes in Riga. He partnered with Levi Strauss to manufacture jeans.
And there was a second element to this as well.
Which Italian city does the fabric come from for jeans? And you can get it from the name, jeans, Genoa.
Genoa. And do you know the answer?
No, I don't, other than Wikipedia in front of me.
Folks, it's been an honour to present this podcast to you. We hope you've enjoyed it. We hope you've laughed and cried your way through this one. Please continue to follow us. You can do that by subscribing at MarkDavidPod across social media, and our email is markdavidpod@gmail.com.
And you can subscribe on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, and any podcast provider.
Also, of course, give a lovely review if you can, and give us 5 stars. Let's say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Farewell, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time with the next podcast from the Jerusalem Post Podcast Travel Edition.